All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this January 7th. I am in sunny San Francisco. It's 2 p.m. over here. It's a little weird in the sense that the time zones, here I am in the U.S., but it feels like the jet lag is like Europe. The change in time zones is almost like from home, is almost like Europe. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate it. So hopefully our internet is good. Speed on the internet was fabulous, amazing, living up to what you'd expect from San Francisco at a good hotel in San Francisco. But we'll see if they throttle it here or they do any of the other gimmicks that some hotels do. We'll see if it holds on. If it holds on overall. All right, let's see. Tonight, I've got the talk in San Francisco about selfishness. I think it's sold out, although you might still be able to register if you still would like to come. Because I'm assuming that a certain percentage of people will register but not come. That usually is what happens. So feel free. There's a link in the description below. There's a link to go register. You do have to register in order to come. And I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. My understanding is that the audience is going to be filled with founders and people from the tech world and a variety of different influential people from the tech world. It's a perfect audience. I can't think of a better audience in a sense. These are the people building the future. These are the people creating the future as we speak. And the idea of exposing them to Ayn Rand's ideas, and particularly to the idea of self-interest, of rational self-interest, I can't think of anything better than that. So stay tuned for my report on that in the next show, which I'm not sure when it will be, probably Sunday. There's not going to be a show tomorrow. Tomorrow's completely packed. There won't be a show Thursday. I'm traveling Thursday, Friday, traveling, Saturday, traveling. So Sunday is probably the next show, and I'll tell you about the talk. Also, you can sign up below. There's a link below to the conference in Naples, Florida, later this month, at the beginning of February, which will celebrate Ayn Rand's birthday. And I think, what is she, 120? She would be 120 years old. This is 120 years from her birth. I think that's right. And it's going to be fabulous. There are going to be a lot of excellent speakers, and I encourage you all to come. All right, let's jump in here to our content. I wanted to start again with a few comments on Charlie Hebdo. It is 10 years. And I make a big deal out of the 10 years because I for two reasons. One, I think Charlie Hebdo was a significant event, maybe not as significant as the Danish cartoons in essentially, but more significant in the sense that it got the attention, whereas the Danish cartoons got very little attention in the end. And Charlie Hebdo got a lot of attention. And so I think it's worth talking about that and talking about any lessons learned, or has the world changed in any way, or has the world adapted in any way? It also, of course, is the 10th anniversary of me starting the show. So Charlie Hebdo and me starting the show will always go together in my mind, and which is good and bad, I guess. I mean, it's a very negative connotation, but it is an issue, the issue of free speech, and the attack of Muslims and Islamism against it, but really the capitulation of Europe and to some extent the United States. Well, no, not to some extent, to a big extent the United States, Europe and the United States to the Islamists. That capitulation has been a big issue that I've been talking about for 20 years, really, since the Danish cartoons came out suddenly, and that the Ayn Rand Institute has been dealing with really since 1989, I think it was, when Iran issued the fatwa against Salman Rushdie. So I think it's a huge issue. It's an issue that really goes to the heart of free speech and what free speech is and what free speech means. And the responsibility of the government not only to not violate our rights directly by censoring us, but also the responsibility of the government to protect our right to speak. And this is exactly what Charlie Hebdo represented, right? It represented the idea that the government did not protect, that the government indeed allowed this crime to happen, has not learned, not learned anything from it. There's been no really confrontation with the Islamists over this issue and other issues in which they are so antagonistic to Western civilization and are willing to use force against Western civilization. There's no war being declared against Islamism in the West, in spite of Charlie Hebdo and the many, many, many terrorist attacks, including the one recently in New Orleans. This whole issue is not taken seriously, and the more it's not taken seriously in the West, the more emboldened the Islamists become, the more powerful they become, the stronger they become. And I think you can see that. You can see that in the West. You can see that in how bold they have been since October 7th in basically saying, no, we want Sharia law in the West. We want the destruction of Israel. And they're willing to say that. And we want to globalize the intifada, which means globalize the violence, which they'll be willing to say not just in the streets of London and Paris and Amsterdam and Europe generally, but in the streets of New York and Los Angeles. So we keep kicking the can of Islamism down the road. We keep not engaging. We keep, not, in a sense, not trying to not make this worse. But it needs to be worse before it can get better. It needs to be worse in the sense that we need to confront it. Right when Charlie Hebdo happened, 4 million people, I think, went out to the streets in Paris, or maybe it was all over Europe, but 4 million people at least were out in the streets demonstrating against it, and the slogan was "Je suis Charlie," I am Charlie, and I am Charlie would have required them to all start drawing cartoons, or at least being willing to display the Danish cartoons. One of the reasons Charlie Hebdo got into trouble with the Islamists, one of the original reasons they got into trouble with the Islamists, is that they were one of the few publications in all of Europe, in all of the world, that were willing to republish the Danish cartoons from the mid-2000s. They were willing to republish cartoons of Mohammed, in spite of the threats. That's what got them on the initial radar, if you will, of the Islamists and motivated the Islamist hostility towards them. So to say "Je suis Charlie" means that you stand with their right and their courage and their willingness to republish those cartoons. And yet, they should have all been, if you went out to "Je suis Charlie" demonstrations, you should have worn a t-shirt with a Mohammed cartoon on it. Now that would have been a statement. And but of course none of that happened. Indeed, immediately after the murders, and to remind everybody, this is when, 11 cartoonists and publishers were murdered in the Charlie Hebdo offices by Islamists, which started a 3-day manhunt, which resulted in a number of different attacks on throughout Paris. Ultimately, they got the people who committed this unbelievable crime, but in the process, they committed more crimes and killed more people. But they slaughtered these cartoonists, and this was less than 10 years after the Danish cartoons and the attacks on the Danish cartoonists that happened, that have been happening over the last couple of decades. But almost immediately after Charlie Hebdo, the response of the intellectuals, of the cultural leaders, and of some of the politicians was, well, maybe they had it coming. Maybe they had it coming. Maybe we just shouldn't antagonize these Muslims. And really, this has been the attitude primarily of Europeans, but to some extent of Americans, since the fatwa on Salman Rushdie, Maybe we should antagonize them. Maybe we just shouldn't criticize religion, but in particular, we shouldn't criticize Islam. We need to live with these people, so we shouldn't insult them. Let's not insult them. And really, Charlie Hebdo crossed the line, and the Danish cartoons crossed the line. And remember, no American publication would publish the Danish cartoons, all the Charlie Hebdo cartoons. In France, Charlie Hebdo was getting in trouble with the government anyway because the government didn't like the whole program by which there was criticisms and critiques. So in the name of let's not insult Muslims, there was a lot of silence about Charlie Hebdo and what to learn from it and what to gain from it. And ultimately, I think the party that won after Charlie Hebdo was that part of the culture that basically said, let's appease them. Freedom of speech is important, but not too much, and not if it offends. And Charlie Hebdo comes just around the same time as you start getting microaggressions and offensive speech and hate speech and all these kind of ideas about, that ultimately transferred into woke, that you can't offend anybody, you can't say anything negative about anybody, certainly not about what's considered a repressed or oppressed group, and certainly Muslim immigrants qualify. And of course, the consequence of this have emboldened Muslims in Europe, instead of assimilating, instead of embracing their new culture, they came to view the new culture as weak. They came to view the new culture as pathetic, as not worthy of assimilating into. They came to view the new culture as a culture that they could change, instead of them assimilating into the culture. The culture in Europe today, the Muslims in Europe today, too many of them, believe that they can change Germany, they can change France, they can change these countries into their image, into Islamist countries ultimately. And that's the Europeans' fault. That's the Europeans' fault. If you don't stand up for your values, free speech being one of them, not allowing rape of your children being another one, or your women being another one, but free speech, if you're not willing to stand up for your values, what are these people assimilating into when there are no values? Why should they respect your culture if you don't respect your culture? Why should they embrace your culture when you demean your culture? Why should they embrace the rule of law when you do not apply the rule of law to them? This is true again in Sweden, in England, in Germany. So when I look at what is happening out there in Europe, I see it as the capitulation, the surrender, the weakness of the Europeans, of Westerners. And something is going to fill that vacuum. And that vacuum has been filled by Islamists who have been sitting on the sideline, have been there, have been threatening, have been intimidating. But we, the West, have let them get away with it. And if by letting them get away with it really, strengthened it, supported it, in every kind of sense. And this also suggests on how you defeat Islamism. You defeat Islamism by embracing good ideas. You defeat Islamism by embracing good principles. For example, you defeat Islamism by protecting the right to free speech, not imprisoning people who tweet insults in the UK right now. That is defeatism, complete defeatism, and it's a rejection of the idea of free speech. It's the government censoring. You win the battle against Islamists by standing up for the right of people to insult Islam and protecting them and defending them on principle because they have a right to do it. Now, in particular with regard to Islam, where there's real reason to insult it. You defend, you know, the right of people to, you know, to have opinions and to have views and to express those views, instead of calling them Islamophobes. Islamophobia is one of the worst, package deals people make out there. You know, afraid of Islam. Well, yeah, there's reason to be afraid of Islam. Certainly Islamists, they're scary. Look at what the guy just did in New Orleans, inspired by Islam. Look at what they did to Charlie Hebdo, inspired by Islam. Look at what they'd like to do to the West. Just see the demonstrations in Europe, the pro-Palestinian demonstrations here in the US. What is their positive vision? It's a scary one for us. For anyone who values freedom, it's scary. So there's a reason to fear, phobia, Islam. We need to get a backbone. Be willing to stand for our values, to fight for our values, to defend our values, and at the same time reject theirs. Reject bad values. Reject values that actually are hostile to America, to our values, to our ideals, to the West more broadly. You can't win unless you know what you're fighting for. You can't win unless you're willing to stand up for your ideals. And you can't win unless you're willing to call the ideas of the other party, the party that is using violence, evil and bad. Because that's what they are. Islamism is an evil ideology. Jihadism is evil. And it must be crushed and it must be destroyed. And that crushing and destruction start with identifying them as evil, with identifying them as bad. All right. So, yeah, you got to stand up to them. And this is not an issue primarily of immigration. This is primarily an issue of standing up for your own values and recognizing what they are. All right, remind you that if you have questions on this, I hope you do. If you have questions on how this applies to, a variety of different contexts, jump in. Happy to take the questions. In the meantime, I see Downlogic has come in with $500. Thank you. Well, $499.99. Thank you. He says, I missed the New Year's Eve Yaron Love Fest. I'm sorry you missed it. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for everything you do. You are my objectivist filter for all my news. I appreciate that, and thank you for the support. That support is fantastic. It's blown away our goal for the hour. So I've raised the goal. Why not? Really appreciate it. All right, let's see. Again, as I've said over and over again, Donald Trump continues to be a really endless source of humor and entertainment and horror, all wrapped up together. The latest is, over the last few days, Donald Trump's commitment now to an expansionist American foreign policy. The idea is that America's too small. We need to grow. We need to expand. We need to take over other countries. We need to go out there and all this combined with his typical, completely ignorant and a little crazy view of economics, view of trade in particular. So here's what Donald Trump wrote about Trudeau leaving. I mean, I think he wrote more, but this is one of the things he wrote about Trudeau leaving. And then we'll also talk about his views on Mexico and Panama and Greenland, and it doesn't stop. It's pretty amazing. And I think Jonathan has a good question regarding this. So this is what Donald Trump wrote about Trudeau. Quote, "Many people in Canada love being the 51st state. The United States can no longer suffer the massive trade deficits and subsidies that Canada needs to stay afloat. Justin Trudeau knew this and resigned. If Canada merged with the United States, there would be no tariffs, taxes would go way down, and they would be totally secure from the threat of Russian and Chinese ships that are constantly surrounding them. Together, what a great nation it would be." Now, I, for one, am all for this. I am all for Canada and the United States becoming one country. But really, is this our highest priority? And here's a thought experiment. If Canada stays Canada and the United States stay United States, and we lower tariffs to zero, then why isn't that the same from an economic perspective as Canada being part of the United States and tariffs being zero? What is it about a border between two countries that makes tariffs bad, and if the border goes away, that makes tariffs good, and if the border goes away, tariffs are bad? Indeed, why don't we have tariffs between states in the United States? I mean, it's a economically ignorant, as I said. Trade deficits are not bad, and they certainly don't constitute subsidies to Canada. But this is kind of a ignorant, blinding, nationalist perspective that basically says, if you're part of us, then trade is win-win. But if you're a different country, even though you're an ally and a friend and everything, but you're a different country, then trade is somehow lose-win or lose-lose. This is magical thinking. This is complete detachment from reality. And of course, if Canada becomes part of the United States, it will now be protected by the United States Navy. Now, both Canada and the United States are part of NATO. I think Canada is pretty secure from the threat of Russian and Chinese ships because they're part of NATO and because they know that if they're attacked, the United States will participate. Again, if they're part of the United States, does that secure them even further? Maybe. Did the Canadians really feel threatened right now by the Russians and the Chinese? Is that a big issue for them? The whole issue is laughable, and we'll get to the other issues that he has. It really is, this is the projection of a thug, a zero-sum mentality that when they think of greatness, they think of it in material terms. A great United States is a big United States. A great United States has lots of territory. A great United States produces everything that it needs. A great United States, I don't know. But it's all about power in the material sense. It's all about size, and that's kind of what seems to be dominating Donald Trump's thinking. So he wants Canada. Canada would, whoa, what a great nation this would be, right? Now, I don't know how Canada would vote, but and I, for other reasons, think it would be great to integrate Canada into America. Canadians would be freer, at least, assuming they would vote like Americans. And yeah, the temptations to put on tariffs would go away. Canada would become almost instantaneously richer because taxes would go down and investments would go up. And as global warming happens, Canadian land becomes habitable, and maybe Americans would actually be incentivized to move up north because it won't be that cold. Who knows? But yeah, it's just funny. I mean, the United States has a lot of problems. The world right now is engaged in a lot of issues and a lot of problems. There are a lot of challenges out there in the world. And it strikes me that Donald Trump's obsession about the size of the United States and growing it in some sense is bizarre. Of all the problems in the world, let's get our own house in order. Let's get out budget deficit, never mind trade deficit, but which doesn't matter, but budget deficits absolutely matters. Let's get our budget deficits in order. Let's get our government spending in order. Let's get the regulatory state in order. Let's actually have a thriving, functioning, dynamic, growing, exciting economy, and then worry about incorporating Canada into us. But it's not just Canada, of course. Trump has talked since the first administration about buying Greenland. He has only intensified this talk even before he's become president now. He constantly talks about buying Greenland, and then I think it was yesterday, he actually indicated that he would be willing to use military force, coercion, both economic and physical, in order to take Greenland and the Panama Canal. So now the United States is going to occupy Greenland and the Panama Canal and include them into the United States. Why? Because somehow, if they're not part of the United States, we get screwed. Again, zero-sum thinking. Why are we getting screwed? I mean, if Greenland is willing to trade with us, why is ownership? It's not even ownership. Why is sovereignty over Greenland? Why is that? What makes a difference? People are now coming up with all kinds of national security reasons why the United States should have sovereignty over Greenland. Denmark, which is the sovereign in Greenland, is a member of NATO, quite a close ally of the United States, has been for decades. What exactly are we worried about? I mean, I understand why Greenland is strategic. It's strategic because of the Arctic, the mineral deposits in the Arctic. It's strategic because of the Northern Passage. As the ice melts, supposedly there'll be a Northern Passage. That's, for trade, that's going to be important, Greenland. And Greenland, of course, has vast natural resources, probably, including rare earth materials that are hard to find outside of Canada, but outside of China. But yeah, but Denmark can just as easily exploit them as we can. Now, it is true that the Danish are probably more environmentally sensitive than we are, but we're pretty bad. What about the people of Greenland? What is their status going to be? Are they going to have a say in any of this? Donald Trump's willing to use military force to take Greenland and the Panama Canal. And the Panama Canal, of course, that's bad because it allows Chinese ships through there. And it was dried up for a while last year because of a drought in the Panama area, and the levels were low. I don't quite get that, but why they couldn't fill it with ocean water. I'm missing something on that account in terms of the Panama Canal. But again, why does it have to be an American sovereignty? Because that makes America great, because we have more stuff. And then I think either this morning or yesterday, Donald Trump then made the argument in a press conference, I guess, or in front of the press, that he had, it was his intention, and note the priorities here. Note the priorities given everything else that's going on in the world. His intention is, I just give you the quote from Donald Trump. Quote, "We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America," which has a beautiful ring that covers a lot of territory. The Gulf of America. What a beautiful name. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is planning to introduce supporting legislation to officially change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Now, a lot of people view this as, yeah, this is good. This is America first. This is bringing in America and raising our spirits. This is projecting American strength. This is completely empty. This is devoid of any ideas, devoid of any real purpose. The opposite, if you will, of Ronald Reagan raising American self-esteem. Ronald Reagan emphasized our real virtues in his speeches. He emphasized the value of America. He emphasized what made America good. Didn't always live up to that. But when he talked about a shining city on the hill, it wasn't just power he was talking about. He was talking about values. Donald Trump is devoured of values. And this goes back to a show I did, I don't know, a couple of years ago maybe, on Tucker Carlson's What Makes America Great, right? What defines America? What makes America America? And he had two things that made America America. This is when the days where Tucker Carlson wasn't a complete nutcase. This is when he was at Fox. The two things that made America America were, one, beautiful scenery. We had the best scenery in the world. It just shows how little he's traveled around the world. But yeah, we do have beautiful scenery, okay? Beautiful scenery. And the second thing that made America America is kind of our acknowledgement of God, our acknowledgement of the importance of God. So religion. So completely misses the point about what America is. And Trump has no conception of what makes an America America. What makes an American an American. It's whether you, I guess, citizen or not. And for him, it's just about the name. It's just about the people who are born here. It's not about ideas. It's not about values. It's not about anything beyond that. So Jonathan asks, Donald Trump is talking about invading Mexico and buying Greenland. Can you explain what the fuck this moron is even doing? This is what the materialist views as greatness. It's about conquest. It's about size. It's about sheer physicality, physical size, if you will. And that's what he thinks is important to America. That's what he thinks makes America, in a sense. And if you view trade as a zero sum, then somehow, again, that trade becomes beneficial if it's part of America, because that views there's some mystical entity called America and some mystical entity called Canada, and when they trade, America is subsidizing Canadian. But if the mystical entity called Canada disappeared, the same people trading, the same exact people trading, somehow is good. It's a win-win. But that's the kind of mystical nationalism that Putin embraces, and that Putin used to justify his invasion of Ukraine. This is magical thinking, mysticism of nationalism. It's primitive and materialistic and pretty disgusting, but it is now the official platform of the United States and the official platform of the Republican Party. And this is obviously a big part of Donald Trump's agenda. Whether he does it all, or any of it for that matter, I don't know, probably not. It seems a little far-fetched, but he's going to talk a lot about it. This is going to take up a lot of his mental energy. I think he views now his success as president is how much bigger America is, how much bigger America is when he leaves office than when he started office. It's batshit crazy stuff. Deepo Diego says fascism 101. Yeah, but he's not even smart enough to know to be a fascist, right? It's just emotionalistic. But the fundamental ideas behind it, yes, absolutely. There are two political entities, but nothing happens differently to trade if you're two political entities. So if you're one political entity, trade is exactly the same. That's the point. I'm not denying the fact that there are two entities here. I'm denying the fact that somehow magically somehow the effects of trade change. And this is the point. This is the point I've made many times before about trade. Countries don't trade with one another. America does not have a trade deficit with Canada. Some Americans have a trade deficit with some Canadians. American companies buy more stuff from Canada, from Canadian companies, than Canadian companies buy from American companies. American individuals buy more stuff than from Canadian individuals and companies than Canadians buy from American individuals and companies. And if you understand trade as between individuals fundamentally, and not between nations, then the disappearance of a border doesn't make any difference. Now, it's true, Canada can have different laws than the United States with regard to all kinds of things. But the very fact that I'm trading with a Canadian has nothing to do, in a sense, with America, and everything to do with me trading with that Canadian. And if the border disappears, I can still trade with that Canadian. And if the laws change, then laws can change at the state level. I still trade with that Canadian at the same level. I mean, if anything disrupts the trade between me and that Canadian, it's tariffs. Get rid of them. But it's not that something that's a zero-sum game. It's not that something that is a zero-sum game or a negative-sum game suddenly becomes a positive-sum game because a border gets wiped out. Yeah, everybody's trying to make excuses for Trump, and you gotta just accept the fact that he's a moron, and that he just expresses, emotions that are completely divorced from thinking, and that he expresses emotions that have to do with a mystical conception of the nation, and if it sounds good, yeah. Perhaps he's thinking about Chinese and Russian influence over these countries. Over Canada, there's a huge Chinese and Russian influence over Canada. I mean, we're soon going to have a pretty good conservative government in Canada. It's probably better than the government we'll have in the United States. What influence? Now, in Panama, if China invades Panama, there's every reason for the United States to go over there and defend Panama. That's part of the Monroe Doctrine. You can't come in and take over in our region. Although China has bases in Cuba, and we haven't done anything about that. So why would we suddenly start doing it with regard to Panama? It's just, the whole thing is just ridiculous, because the reality is that what's the value of Panama? The real value of Panama is trade. The real value of the Panama Canal is the facilitation of globalization, of global trade. And global trade, globalization, is the one thing that he hates. The one thing that since the 1980s, the one thing Donald Trump has been consistent about is his hatred of globalization, his hatred of trade deficits. Well, you would want to shut down the Panama Canal, not save it, not bring it under American authority if you didn't like global trade. So, he's completely irrational, is my conclusion from this. And he's getting more irrational with age, which is not surprising at all. At all. And, yesterday, Trump reiterated the fact that there's going to be widespread tariffs being imposed pretty much on day one, including 25% tariffs on Canada. Now, maybe he'll stop because Trudeau is out and he doesn't want to punish the Conservatives. We'll see. But he at least has reaffirmed, recommitted over and over and over again, including this week, including yesterday, his devotion and dedication to raising tariffs significantly on global trade. All right. Let us see. And yeah, I know everybody thinks he's using it as a negotiating tactic. Maybe, but again, no evidence of that. Nothing of substance was negotiated better in his first term because of his tariff threats. And he imposed tariffs in his first term that were very damaging to the U.S. economy. So I don't know why nobody takes what he did in his first term seriously. And this term, he is committed to doing much more. All right, Meta, i.e. Facebook, is taking a page from X, from Twitter, and shifting, again, if you will, to be more accommodative of the Trump administration, of Trump himself, and just a general shift in Mark Zuckerberg's attitude towards, I think, Trump, the right, if you will, more broadly, and free and expression on his platform. So they're getting rid of the what do you call it? They had a committee that decided fake news and that moderated what was posted on Facebook. So he is completely changing moderation policies. He's ending its third-party fact-checking program. So there was this committee that was fact-checking, experts fact-checking what was published on Facebook that it created a lot of antagonism and a lot of resentment. Anyway, that is going to end. If you remember, there was a lot of harassment in Congress about this, which caused him to put it in place originally. Originally, there was no fact-checking on Facebook, and it was harassment by Congress that forced him ultimately to put in fact-checking programs. So he is dropping the fact-checkers and replacing it with community notes, which is similar to what Twitter does. That is, users can actually comment when something is factually incorrect, or when they think something is factually incorrect, they can engage in putting a comment on something. According to Zuckerberg, this is all aimed at reduce mistakes and foster a more open discourse. I think Facebook has lost a lot of the dynamism that it used to have because people were not as engaged with ideas on Facebook. They shifted over to Twitter. I don't know if this will work. He cites this as a effort to restore free expression on the Meta platform on Facebook. I guess it's also on Instagram, Facebook, and Instagram. So it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out. Interesting. This is an interesting one, right? Is that in order to facilitate this, Facebook is actually going to have to move its content moderation operations, its team, out of California, which has very restrictive rules about content moderation, and they're going to move it to Texas, where the state is not, is in a sense leaves them alone, is not getting as involved in these kind of issues. So state law driving at least the location of some of these corporate functions that exists. All right. Somebody says coercion and physical force are two different things. Are they really? That's a new one to me. That is quite an invention to say that coercion and physical force are not. They're the same thing. One is literal physical force, and one is the threat of physical force, which is basically the same thing. Both are physical force, and both should be barred and from human interaction, and unless you're using them for self-defense. If you've got questions about any of this, please use the super chat. I see a lot of questions in the chat, but if you want them answered, super chat is the way to do it. Yeah. All right. As I said, Trump and the whole phenomena around Trump will continue to entertain and provide lots of opportunities for us to be discussing and debating. Let's see. We talked about Meta, Nvidia. I think I'm pronouncing it right for a change. Interestingly, at CES, CES is the big conference in Vegas, the Consumer Electronic Conference in Vegas, and every year it's an exciting place where companies go. Everybody but Apple. Apple is the only company that doesn't go there. Go and kind of show off the up-and-coming products, anywhere from new laptops and computers to new phones to health tracking devices to televisions, drones, all kinds of stuff is on display at CES. I've never been because it's a zoo. But I kind of would love to go because it's exciting, it's dynamic, and it's future oriented, and it seems like it would be fun to be there. Anyway, this year, the keynote speaker at the opening event of the CES was Jensen Huang from Nvidia, which is interesting, right? I mean, Jensen Huang designs chips, right? They design chips, originally chips for GPUs, for gamers, and now they dominate the world with chips for AI. And so he's not exactly a consumer electronics guy, right? Well, he is in the sense that he designs chips for gamers, and gamers are consumer electronics. That's a big consumer electronics play. Anyway, he gave a 90-minute talk at CES, which just shows, I think, the shift in Silicon Valley and the shift in consumer electronics towards more and more implementations of AI and AI chips. Indeed, one of the things that he announced is an offering that will be available later this year, basically a personal AI supercomputer. It will be a AI capable with AI chips, a computer that will sit on your desktop that starts at about $3,000, which is not a lot of money if you think about supercomputers. And you'll be able to use it in your own home or office. It'll be called, it's dubbed right now Digits. It will go on sale in May, supposedly. It's about the size of a small book, so it's competing with the Mac Mini or the Mac Studio. And it contains the new Nvidia superchip, which is called GB10, GB10 Grace Blackwell, which is optimized to accelerate the computations needed to train and run AI models, and comes equipped with 128 gigabytes of unified memory and up to 4 terabytes of storage. So you will be able to run your own and train your own AI models on your own desktop, and this will expand the use, the ability for startups to engage in AI. So again, this is part of that evolution where AI is going to become more and more a part of our lives, and we're going to see more and more products using it. It's part of this evolution where AI really starts being applied to things that you and I will feel. People outside the tech world will start really feeling it. The other big thing that he announced is just the extent to which there is demand for Nvidia chips, and many of them specialized chips, in what he's calling physical AI. And physical AI is things like robots and autonomous cars and things, again, out there, physical things that are using AI and Nvidia AI chips in order to function in the world. Now, he talked about AI, physical AI acting using what he says reason, planning, and acting. Of course, I would argue that no machine can reason. It can simulate reason in a sense. It is a simulation of reason, but it's not actually reasoning. And we'll have to do a whole show on AI and what we think about AI and what AI can and cannot do, which I think is interesting. But there are going to be some big breakthroughs, I think, as the price point of these things come down, as more and more people are using it. Big breakthroughs, and this will start with huge advancements in gaming, which is the original Nvidia industry, but you're going to see a lot of growth in gaming and a lot of growing sophistication in gaming. But then robotics and autonomous vehicles. I mean, we are going to get autonomous vehicles. It is going to happen. It is going to be part of our world, and that is a terrific move if you care about safety and if you care about human life and so on. Less fun for us people, the one of us who like to drive, but it is, other than that, is going to make life more convenient and much, much safer. All right, let's see. What else? Oh yeah, quickly on Nippon. We talked about this a few weeks ago, but U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel have filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration. They filed it yesterday. They're claiming that the president ignored the rule of law to gain favor with trade unions. They alleged that the reasons for blocking the trade were purely political reasons that had nothing to do with national security or any other issues. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the courts deal with this, whether this reaches the Supreme Court. It's going to be also really interesting to see what stance I think the Trump administration Justice Department will defend the Biden administration's decision. What happens if the Supreme Court or any other court overrules Biden and approves the merger? Will Trump have any leverage at that point to cancel it? Because Trump is very much against this merger. From the beginning, he said his administration would not let Nippon Steel buy U.S. Steel. Again, I think for purely political union and American steel reasons, like mystical American, it's the same thing. Panama Canal, American, Greenland, American, U.S. Steel, American. He will try to stop it by any means possible. But I think what U.S. Steel and Nippon Steel are hoping is once a court makes a decision, Trump won't have any real channel by which to act. All right. Let's see. All right, finally, I want to talk about Iran. There's a lot to talk about Iran. I was supposed to talk about Iran yesterday, and somehow I skipped the topic. But a number of things that are happening that I think are worthwhile talking about Iran. I think the most important thing to note is that Iran is a shadow of what it was just a year ago. Iran today is probably in the weakest position it's been since the end of the Iran-Iraq War. The Iran-Iraq War was a war that lasted 8 years. I think it was 8 years, 7 or 8 years. During the 1980s. It was a brutal war in which over 1 million people died. And since that war, Iran has been gaining strength and gaining influence. Arguably, before October 7th, Iran was the most important actor in the Middle East. More influential than Israel or Egypt or Turkey or Saudi Arabia or any of these other countries. It basically had control over the entire Fertile Crescent that goes from Iran through Iraq through Syria to Lebanon. It had this massive bastion, like almost within Israel, with Hamas in Gaza and in the West Bank. It had the Houthis to the south of Saudi Arabia, and it seemed to have surrounded Saudi Arabia from north and south, and it was exerting its influence and was kind of the cocky master of the Middle East. And they were definitely behaving in a cocky way. They didn't care about anybody, didn't care about anything. October 7th has definitely changed that, and Israel's response to October 7th has basically changed that. Israel not yet completely defeating Hamas, but at least weakening Hamas significantly, weakening Hezbollah dramatically, changing the entire dynamics within Lebanon so that the other Lebanese factions outside of Hezbollah are gaining influence, causing as a consequence of its defeat of Hezbollah the collapse of the Bashar al-Assad regime in Syria, and therefore handing it over to non-Iranian influenced parties. Also showing Iran to be a paper tiger by basically being able to fly all the way from Israel to Iran to basically destroy anything that Israel wants to destroy in Iran. And showing that Iran can do nothing about it. They can send hundreds of missiles towards Israel, which Israel can mostly knock down, and the missiles don't create that much damage. Iran today has very little influence. It still has a grip on the Iraqis, but you would suspect that many Iraqis are starting to think, they're such a paper tiger. Do we really need them? Do we really need to kowtow to them? And you might see very, very well see in the next year or so a civil war breaking out in Iraq, or a dramatic shift away from Iranian influence within Iraqi politics. Even the Houthis ultimately are going to be isolated and potentially be destroyed. Israel's attacks on them have definitely reduced the amount of missiles they have launched against Israel. And if the United States ever got serious about opening the trading routes through the Suez Canal, they could take them out very quickly and very easily if they so chose. And so politically, Tehran has lost everything. But it's not just politically. The Iranian economy is devastated. There's a real economic crisis right now, which is providing a real threat to social unrest. The merchant class, if I can call them that, merchants generally, who have in the past been supporters of the regime, and in the past actually were the backbone of the revolution when it happened, kind of the middle class backbone of the revolution, are turning against the regime. They are super upset about spiraling inflation and an economic crisis that is destroying their businesses. Even oil workers have started protesting over the fact that their wages are in real terms declining dramatically. Iran's currency ended 2024 at a record low of 821,500 rials to the dollar. 821,500 rials to the dollar, which is down 40% from the beginning of the year. Gross domestic product per capita fell 45% since 2012. 2012, right? From 2012. And Iran is now a very, very poor country. GDP per capita is 4,465. That's poor. Protests over economic issues are rising in frequency all across the country. Nurses and telecommunication workers have protested. Retired teachers have protested. The delays in welfare payments because the government just doesn't have any money. And it's spreading. It's spreading. It's getting worse. And these are the kind of demonstrations that if they turn political, and if they are matched up with kind of the Gulf Revolution and other factions within Iran who are upset at this regime, could really lead ultimately to the collapse of this regime for no other reason, for economic reasons. So Iran is on the brink. It really is on the brink. And what an opportunity this presents the incoming Trump administration or the Israelis if they want to topple it. It wouldn't take much. It wouldn't take much. Now, many expect the Trump administration to get tough on Iran with sanctions. That's good, and that will help on the economic front. But an American strike on Iran's nuclear weapons potential, because note that Iran now is a wounded animal. They're stuck in a corner. They have no influence. The only way they can regain influence in the Middle East is by announcing that they have nukes. Now's the time to destroy that capacity. Now, some think, Boaz, my colleague in Israel, believes that Israel will strike over the next 2 weeks before Trump comes into office. There's kind of this period where Biden can't do anything against Israel, and Trump probably wouldn't do anything against Israel. So now's the time that they will strike. I find that hard to believe. But his argument is Israel's changed. It's the whole strategic orientation of Israel has shifted from defense to offense. You saw that with Hezbollah, with the beepers, with taking out Nasrallah and the entire leadership. You saw that in their proactive attitude towards Syria. They are ready to strike Iran, and they will. Okay? I'll believe it when I see it, and I hope he's right. I am suspect. Supposedly within the Trump advisors, there's a lot of, the transition team, there's a lot of discussion about what should be done about Iran when Trump enters office. Should it just give a green light to Israel? Should the United States join Israel? Should it do it itself? Or should it just annex Iran to the U.S.? No, they haven't gotten that far. But who knows, maybe. Maybe they'll annex Israel. But, or should they negotiate? Or should they negotiate? I have a feeling the negotiating people will win out, but we will see. We will see. Again, we will see in the first few days of the Trump administration the renewed attitude towards Iran. But it is an historic opportunity, and an opportunity we won't get again if they develop nukes. Historic opportunity to topple this regime. And that should be the goal. The goal should not be just destruction of the nuclear program. The whole thrust should be the toppling of the Iranian regime. That should be the purpose of any strike against Iran. And new sanctions and anything else. We should be explicit about our aims. We should say explicitly, this regime is history, this regime needs to go, it's evil, it's bad, it's the evil empire. It's not so much an empire, but it's an evil political regime, and it needs to be wiped out, in a sense of replaced, needs to be replaced. And inspire and help the Iranian people pull that off. All right, thank you, everybody. That'll be the news for Tuesday, January 7th. And I will now turn to your questions. I will do the questions and we'll call it a day, and I will go and continue prepping, or go to do some prep for my talk tonight. I still have to figure out the exact angle and how I'm going to address the audience tonight, what content exactly we will cover. It's going to be fun, though. I'm looking forward to it. All right, Jennifer. Again, thank you, DWN Logic. Really, really appreciate the support. Jennifer says, do you think people should try to be careful when dealing with other people's personal tastes? I guess the nature of the relationship between the people involved matters here. Teasing between close friends might be fine. Yeah, I mean, I very much think it's contextual, and it depends what you mean by personal tastes and how bad another person's tastes really are, and what's at stake, and whether it's important or not, how close you are, whether it might be viewed as an insult, and whether you care about it if it's viewed as an insult. So there's a lot of context that I think has to be brought to this, right? Have to be brought to this. So it would need a more concrete example, but certainly, teasing between good friends where it's all being done good, positively, with positive intentions, and nobody's going to take it too seriously, and it's kind of done in fun. I don't see any problem with that, and some friendships are more accommodative of teasing than others, because some people are more sensitive than other people. And you have to know your friends. J. Lord, not the Western gaming industry, unfortunately. Apparent from some small indie developers. However, gamers, by the large, to their credit, are anti-woke. Thoughts on why gamers are anti-woke? I don't know. I don't know gamers. Gaming is not something I'm engaged in, and that culture is not. I'm not a part of that culture. I think it's mainly a male-dominated culture. Maybe that's part of it. What else would affect gamers? I think gamers are a little detached, maybe, from the kind of maybe the more loners, and more detached from the kind of social pressure that woke engages. But I don't know. I'm speculating here. I really don't know. I don't know enough about gaming culture, who the gamers are. How many of them are college students? You remember, woke is to a large extent a phenomena of college and college graduates. Woke is not something that is very, very common outside of colleges and college graduates. And maybe gamers are just less inclined to be in college. And if they are in college, maybe they're more inclined to be less engaged, more alone, if you will. Jay Lodosa says, until it stops being woke, the U.S. is the evil empire. Getting back to the Ragen era and get rid of the radical egalitarian and progressivism, then it won't be an evil. Yeah, I don't think America is evil, even as it is. I think you overestimate wokeness and what it is. But America in and of itself is not qua America woke. There are woke influences in America, but it's not the dominant view. It's not a dominant position. America still uses drones to assassinate what they view as terrorist leaders overseas. They still bomb the hell out of ISIS. America is still, to a large extent, driven by meritocracy. Now, you could say that our universities and our intellectuals are advocating evil ideas, and they're spreading those ideas all over the world, and that's horrible. And that the American government and some American corporations use woke in their hiring, and that's horrible. Yes, all of that is true. But America still, and you can see that just walking around even the most woke city in the country, San Francisco. I mean, there's a dynamism and an engagement and to some extent, a pro-freedom element, and there's innovation and there's growth, and you just can't dismiss all that because woke is evil, woke is bad, but you can't extrapolate from that for a whole country. And I don't think woke has fundamentally changed the essence of the country. I still think that America is never going to be an egalitarian country. Woke will never be successful completely in this country. I think the left is ultimately, as I've said over and over again, a failure, and in that sense, I'm much more worried, as I've said over and over again, about the far right than I am about the far left, and so what today people are calling the woke right. There's way too much influence for woke. There's way too much egalitarianism in our culture. But to paint the American culture as woke and as egalitarian and therefore as evil, I think is very wrong. It's to miss the essence of what America is about and what America is. Michael, do you think the protagonist in the movie Whiplash was largely second-handed and altruistic, placing the approval of the abusive teacher above himself and his own happiness? No. I don't think that at all. I think that what he was doing was trying to attain the best within him. That he realized that in order to achieve real happiness ultimately, in order to achieve real happiness, real self-esteem, in order to achieve it required the achievement of his full potential, required being the best that he could be. And that this teacher was his way to be the best that he could be. That this teacher pushing and driving him was his best path to being the best that he could be. Having a great teacher who wouldn't tolerate mediocrity, who wouldn't tolerate a second-class effort, who wouldn't tolerate second-handedness, because you had to be an original player. And the final scene is so beautiful and so brilliant because he is playing what he wants to play in the end. And the teacher fully appreciates that and fully embraces that and sees the genius in it. And they are feeding off of each other's energy to achieve a state of bliss, of success, and if he continues like this, of happiness, that, I don't think he could ever achieve any other way. And in order to do that, one of the things the movie shows is you have to have a hierarchy of values. And sometimes, particularly when you're striving to a great achievement, and when you're young and striving for great achievement, sometimes that means giving up other values in order to attain the higher value. And if your highest value is your career, as objectivism, you're integrating your integrating value as your career, then sometimes you're going to have to give up on a romance, which is also a high value, in order to be able to fully focus, fully engage, fully invest in that achievement. And I think, again, the movie illustrates beautifully that there are periods in your life where you better be single-mindedly focused on the thing that you love and want to be great at. Now, not everybody is like that. Not everybody has that single thing. Not everybody wants that single thing and has the ability in any realm to be that exceptional. But for some people, for the great geniuses, that is the case. So yeah, I mean, it's anything but altruistic. It's the most selfish thing he could be doing. The most selfish thing he could be doing is to open himself up to this teacher, to take the abuse, if you will, in order to achieve excellence, in order to achieve, and he loses it at some point. He can't handle it at some point. And he has to figure out ultimately how to handle it, how to be himself, how to accept, embrace, if you will, the abuse, and use it as a positive energy to achieve greatness. And that's the final scene. The final scene is when he's integrated. All of the practice, all of the craziness, all of the insane hours, all of the effort, and has now accepted it, integrated it, and just, lets it out, lets it manifest in its playing. So no, I don't see anything second-hand and altruistic, and I don't think he's putting anything above his own happiness. Happiness is not about achieving the mediocre state of satisfaction, lack of conflict, lack of effort, having a nice regular girlfriend, nice regular job, nice regular hours, nice regular station wagon, having a dog, and a 4-bedroom house with a yard. Happiness means pushing yourself. It means making the most of what you have, not settling for the average, for the mediocrity. Average for you, never mind for other people, for the mediocrity. Pushing yourself to be the best that you can be. And yes, you can have that with the station wagon and the family and the dog and the house. But most people just settle for that. It's not part of their plan. It's just a settlement. So Whiplash calls you to an exceptional life, which is exactly what Ayn Rand does. She calls you to an exceptional life. String a bell. Hello, Yaron. What are your thoughts on living in Portugal? I don't know. I've never lived in Portugal. If you want to live somewhere in Europe, it certainly would be on my short list. It seems to have good tax treatment if you're coming in from the United States, or coming in from another country. It has good weather, which I value quite a bit. It's Lisbon and Porto are both cities one can get around pretty easily. They seem to have a dynamic cultural life, good restaurants and music and performances and a good place. They're pretty cities. They're very touristy, so there are a lot of tourists. You have to take that into account. And people are friendly. The Portuguese are quite friendly, and they speak English, which is important. They speak a greater percentage of Portuguese speak English than Spaniards or Italians. So yeah, I think it's probably a nice place to live. I'm going to spend 3+ weeks there this summer in Lisbon, so I can in a sense let you know after that what I think, right? Particularly as compared to, let's say, Barcelona. All right. Let's see. Michael. Oh, one can think that he oh, this is a continuation. Sorry, Michael, I split the question up. Or do you think that he does so for selfish purposes? He wants to be great, and he knows the abusive teacher will help him get in there. Exactly. I'm glad you followed that up, because that's exactly the point. You get it. All right, Mary Eileen. We all should have been protesting, carrying pictures of Mohammed, but there wouldn't have been any police protection. Yeah, I think that's right. But remember that the Ayn Rand Institute, we made big posters out of the cartoons. And we went on university campuses and displayed those cartoons and used it to have debates and events on free speech. And there were demonstrations, and they got ugly. And, campus authorities were unhappy. And we did it. I remember I used to wear a bulletproof vest in those days when I did my public appearances. If we don't stand up, in spite of the lack of police protection, then we've given in. The Ayn Rand Institute and I, on our websites, in various times in history, I think on my show, on the thumbnail of my show, there was a Mohammed cartoon. On the thumbnail of my show, and what else? And the Institute put up some of the cartoons. And yeah, it was risky, but you got to take risks. You got to do it. And by the way, one of the things that mitigates risk is numbers. The more people do it, the less likely it is that they're going to find you out and try to get all of you. All right. Let's see. Michael. I never liked Francisco. Very cold, unfriendly. San Francisco. Very cold, unfriendly lefties. Filth everywhere. I've never really experienced San Francisco that way. I mean, San Francisco's depend where you go in San Francisco. Yes, I've never liked the homelessness in San Francisco, but other than that, in the old days there was less of that. I've never experienced San Francisco as unfriendly, and yeah, they're lefties, but that also means they have a great opera, they have a lot of culture, they have fantastic museums. And I've never experienced San Francisco as particularly dirty, except for certain parts of downtown. But there are beautiful, beautiful residential areas in San Francisco that are wonderful, wonderful to live in and to visit. Ian, and of course it's just geographically gorgeous, just beautiful, just beautiful. Ian, I left my heart in San Francisco. Yeah, that's a well-known sentiment. That's from the song. Urban Porcupine, I think we should change the name of the moon to Space America. Well, we should just change the name of the universe to Universe America. Captain America in Universe America. I don't know, something like that. Yeah, if you want to know what Americanism really is, Jonathan reminds us that Ayn Rand wrote an entire book on Americanism, which you can find on Amazon. I don't have it here with me because it's at home. But Jonathan was the editor of that book. I have an essay in that book. And of course, most importantly, Ayn Rand has a long essay in that book explaining to all of us what Americanism actually is. And fundamentally, it's individualism. Gail, should we be accepting large dollars from Saudi Arabian business to build AI big tech? Trump news conference. I don't know what he said at the news conference, but, everybody needs to decide, who they're going to raise money from. And some companies can take money from Saudi Arabia. It's, there are risks involved, obviously. There's significant risks. We should be careful what technology the Saudis get their hands on. But unless we declare Saudi Arabia an enemy, and we haven't, and I'm not sure we should, we can't ban people from trading with them. And trading with them means also accepting their money if that money is private. Now, I don't know what the president said, what Trump said about this. I don't know what the president should get involved in something like that. But if he viewed Saudi Arabia as it's good that Saudis are investing in America, it just shows how pragmatic and unthinking and non-strategic he really is. J. Lord, Ayn Rand was pro-train. So I thought, so am I, though for mass market transport, I prefer planes and private transport. Rail should be for freight and seance tourism until we get planes large enough for freight. Yeah, I mean, planes large enough for freight seems like very expensive. Trains should just be fast. I mean, if you go to Europe in some places, and if you go to Japan, going by train is amazing because they're super fast. Some of them go 300 miles an hour. They go super fast. It's super convenient. It takes you from city center to city center. You don't have to deal with airports and traveling in and out of airports. So no, I'm very pro-train, and I would shift mass transportation to trains. I mean, they should be all completely privatized. And by completely privatizing them, hopefully there would be an incentive. And also environmental regulations need to be scrapped so that we can develop high-speed trains. Imagine a really high-speed train between San Francisco and Los Angeles. Or, and this is even a bigger no-brainer, between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. I mean, who wouldn't want to take that instead of driving through the desert for 4 hours? A high-speed train that took 2 to 3 hours to get from LA to Vegas would be amazing. It would be much easier than an airplane flight, right? Less the hassle of airplane flights. So, no, I think the problem is the way we do railway, and of course the reason the rails are so primitive in the United States, are so backward in the United States, at least, I don't know about Australia and other places, is because the railroads were the second industry that was really regulated in the United States after banks. Railroads were regulated from the mid part of the 19th century heavily, and that decimated the railroad industry, the private railroad industry over time. I've got a book at home somewhere that kind of documents what happened to the railroad industry. Yeah, they just opened a high-speed train from Paris to Berlin, 8 hours at 200 miles per hour. Now, 8 hours is a long time, so I wouldn't take it. I would still fly. But maybe one day I'll get up to 300 or 400 miles an hour. Now it's a 4-hour trip, and for a 4-hour trip, maybe it's worth taking a train rather than flying. Neo says, do you know anything about the privatization of public transportation in the UK back in the 1980s and why it failed? I know a little bit, and the primary reason it failed is that the government couldn't stop dabbling in it. And while it privatized certain aspects of the rail industry, it still continued to control and regulate and dabble with it and make it so that it couldn't really, and the uncertainty about future regulations and how they would do it restrained investment, and trains could not be truly independent. Now, what I should do is I should ask my friends at the Adam Smith Institute in London, who were actually the people who wrote the white paper that promoted the privatization. So I should ask them what they think went wrong, if anything, with the privatization. I'll do that and get back to you. Raphael says, the podcast guy from Porto made a short Insta video about you and has 300K views. You said Portugal is poor compared to the US and people went nuts. They went nuts because it's not poor compared to the United States? Are they insane? Do they know what GDP per capita is in Portugal versus the United States? And pretty much every other measure of wealth, Portugal is very poor as compared to the United States. So people hate me now in Portugal because I expressed the reality that Portugal is poorer than the US. That's what it takes to get 300 hits on me, is for people to hate on me for something true that I say. Pretty amazing. I'm curious, Raphael, if you can share with me any comments people had that are reasonable in terms of why they would be upset by something like that I said. Mary Eileen, what is the likelihood that we will see flying cars anytime soon? Will regulations make them impossible? I assume we have the technology. I'd love to have one. I think you might see flying taxis, just like you'll see driverless taxis before you'll see truly driverless cars. I think you'll see that in the next 5 years. You'll see driverless taxis, flying taxis in certain cities. I think it's probably not it'll take 20 years before we can buy a flying car ourselves as individuals. They will have to figure out how to regulate all of our flying because they can't trust us to actually be in the air without a massive amount of regulations and controls. But yeah. Shazbat says, greetings from Tara Smith's symposium in New York City. Oh, that's great that she's having a symposium in New York City. I didn't realize she was there. Say hi back to Tara. Tara is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I'm glad you're there, Shazbat. Anne says, I remember you were disappointed when Bernstein interviewed with Grossman. Does the same hold for Amish interviewing with Jasinski? I didn't realize Amish was interviewing with Jasinski, but so let me get context on that. Let me find out what exactly we're talking about. But yeah, it would be disappointing. Everything else, without knowing any additional facts beyond that, that would be disappointing. Although Jasinski is far better than Grossman in so many different respects, but Jasinski is affiliated now with Grossman, so I find that sad. J-Lord, sorry about the typos. Did you enjoy Brisbane? I love the old neoclassical sandstone buildings. Thoughts on slow luxury trains for scenic tourism. I like the slow luxury trains. They don't have to be too slow. It would be what I would like is really fast trains that go fast over the boring stuff and slow over the beautiful stuff. But yes, I think the scenic trains that cross the American Rockies that are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. There are scenic trains that I think the the Orient Express that goes in Malaysia and Thailand to Singapore. That's supposed to be a beautiful ride. I like it. Me personally, I would probably be impatient with it, but I can understand why, if it's luxury and it's really beautiful, why people would really love it. Mark Thomas says, enjoy your speech in San Francisco. Have sent email about it. Thank you. I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you, guys. All right. That is it. I really, really appreciate all the Super Chat support. We're $23 short from our $750 goal. I don't know if somebody wants to come in with 25 to get us over the hump. But anyway, thank you for all the Super Chatters. I will see, I guess, some of you at the talk tonight. I'm looking forward to that. I will see others of you as I maybe even as I travel around the country in the weeks to come. Hopefully some of you will be in Florida as well. I'm also giving a talk at Clemson University on Israel. At the University on Israel, I'm hoping some of you who live in the Clemson surrounding can come. More information on that in the weeks to come, including a link and how to register and how to find out about it. We will get that to you as well. But talk on Israel at a university campus, that should be fun. And what else? Yeah, a lot going on. And I will see you on Sunday. Remember, no show. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I mean, maybe something will change and sneak something in. But for now, nothing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you. Bye.